Good afternoon, everyone. My name is City Councilor at Large Michael Flaherty, Vice Chair of the Committee on Government Operations. It is Monday, October 25th, 2021, and we are here today in a virtual hearing on Docket 0600, an ordinance to create a task force to address literacy rates in the city of Boston. This was sponsored by my colleague, City Councilor Juliet Mejia, and referred to the committee on April 28th of 2021. In accordance with Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021, modifying certain requirements of the open meeting law and relieving public bodies of certain requirements, including the requirements that public bodies conduct its hearings in public place that is open and physically accessible to the public. The City Council will be conducting this hearing virtually via Zoom, and it is being recorded. This enables the City Council to carry out its responsibilities while adhering to the public health accommodations and ensuring public access to its deliberations through adequate and alternative means. The public may watch this hearing via live stream at www.boston.gov/city-council-TV and on Xfinity 8, RCN 82, Verizon 964. It will also be rebroadcast at a later date. Written comments may be sent to the committee email at ccc.go@boston.gov and will be made part of the public record and available to all city councilors. If you wish to provide public comments and have not signed up to do so, please email Christine O'Donnell now at christine.o'donnell, ODONNELL, @boston.gov to receive the link. This proposal will establish a task force on literacy rates in the city of Boston. The purpose of the task force will be to study rates of illiteracy across the city of Boston, to develop a plan to help students and children who are not able to read or write to access city services, as well as adults, and to recommend programs and policies to advance literacy in adults and children. The proposal establishes a membership of the task force, and that terms provide that members of the task force who are not employees of the city will receive a stipend of $100 per meeting, not to exceed $50,000 per year, and outlines the responsibility and authorities of the task force. Joining us today from the administration are Trin Nguyen of the Director of Workforce Development, Kristen DeBolio, Director of Adult Learning, Yusufi Valley, Director of the Mayor's Office of Immigrant Advancement, and Jennifer Viva Wong, Director of the Office of Language Communication. We also have administration panel. After the administration panelists, we also have a second panel. And on this panel, we have Dr. Gail Crump-Swaby, Associate Professor of Counseling, Clinical Mental Health Counseling Coordinator, Springfield College, as well as Elizabeth Santiago, founder of the Untold Narratives, and Lee Holler, English for New Bostonian Director Programs. I will now turn it over to my colleague, Councilor Juliet Mejia, for opening remarks, and also just recognize my colleagues in order of their arrival: Councilor Kenzie Bach, Councilor Ed Flynn, and Councilor Liz Braden. I'm sure other colleagues will be joining, and when they do, I'll make sure that they're recognized. But for the time being, the chair recognizes the lead sponsor, my colleague, Juliet Mejia. Good afternoon, Juliet.
Good afternoon, Councilor Flaherty. ¿Cómo está, mi amiguito? Muy bien, I guess is what you're saying, but you were on mute. But yes, thank you so very much for hosting. I just also want to make note that we have also added Edith Bailey to our advocate panel, and she is joining us as well. It was a late addition, but better late than never. And I just wanted to note that she'll be joining us as well. So I'd like to thank you. I also would like to thank my colleagues, Councilor Flynn, Breeden, and Bach, for always showing up and being engaged in these conversations. So thank you all for being here. I just want to take a quick moment to explain this ordinance, what this ordinance is and how we got here. During the formation of our ordinance to update the city's language and communications access laws, we had the idea to create accessibility programming that would allow people who cannot read or write in any language to be able to obtain information and services, ideally through the use of text-to-speech technology or the use of easily identifiable symbols such as flags. We received feedback from the administration that the city was presently not able to determine what the best type of programming would be, given how the city has not explored this kind of service in depth. So the idea came about to create a task force on literacy to do several things. First, it will give us more accurately able to capture data on literacy rates in our city, both from adults and children. The purpose is to get into more accurate scope on this issue, as the existing data is extremely out of date. I believe the last time that there was a report, it was in 2003. Second, the task force would work to identify ways to provide services to people who currently do not read or write in any language. Finally, the task force will explore ways to improve literacy rates amongst adults and children. In order to make progress in these areas, the ordinance we are speaking on today outlines who ought to be on this task force and what their responsibilities are, which are essentially the ones we listed above. The questions that I have for the administration and to the advocates here are going to focus on two areas. Who ought to be on the task force and what work should they be doing? And for many of you, I always talk about the fact that we have a lot of young people who are struggling with reading and writing, and unfortunately are being passed from grade to grade. And we hope that this can help address the school to prison pipeline. Many of our kids are ending up in DYS, and then they become adults and then are entering the prison system and are still coming out and unable to read and write. So I think that we have an opportunity to really look into this issue and explore literacy as a way to interrupt the cycle of poverty. And then the other piece is that we have a lot of people who come to this country with interrupted education, and even folks who are here in the city of Boston who've experienced interrupted education and are struggling to read and write even in their own native languages. And I see this as an opportunity to really get a better handle as to what this looks like here in the city of Boston, so that we can better prepare our workforce, as well as looking into how we can help support students in our Boston public schools. So looking forward to this conversation and working alongside the administration and the advocates to get us to a place where we're able to provide the services to everyone who needs it in ways that they best understand. Thank you, Councillor Flaherty.
Thank you, Councilor Mejia, and thank you for sponsoring this. And just briefly, my colleagues, Councilor Bach, followed by Councilor Flynn, followed by Councilor Braden, if you want to offer a brief opening comment before we get into the panel. Chair recognizes Councilor Bach.
Thank you so much, Councilor Flaherty. I'll be very brief because I'm excited to get to the panel. Just thank Councilor Mejia for introducing this, and say that I think literacy is so important, and I think so often it's this invisible barrier for a lot of folks in our society. And actually, in a lot of interesting ways, the internet has introduced even more text into people's lives, and that can be great, and it can unlock whole corners of the world if you are literate. But if you're not, then it really can put up a barrier. And so I think and so often, Councilor Mejia also introduced a resolution last week about dyslexia awareness. And I have known a number of people in my life who, because of not having the reading instruction in the right way, haven't been able to drive up their literacy, and then have been, made to feel as though they're not smart and wise and wonderful people, when in fact they just needed the right kind of instruction. And so I just think that there's so many people walking around in our society who are made to feel less than because they haven't had the opportunity to really reach that literacy, whether in their own language or they might be wonderfully literate in their home language, and they're still held back by the English barrier. So I just think anything we can do as a city. There are so many. This came up in our BPS budget conversations last year, or I guess earlier this year, as just a core issue in our schools. And just so often you think you have a different problem, and the problem you actually have is a literacy problem. And so, yeah, just anything we can do. I'm excited. I know there are a lot of partners who've been working hard on this for a long time, but I'm a big believer that Councilor Mejia is right, and that a kind of focus and coming together on something can help move the needle. So thanks to everybody here today. And thanks again to you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Bach. Chair recognizes Councilor Ed Flynn.
Thank you, Councilor Flaherty. I also want to say thank you to Councilor Mejia for the important work she's doing on this issue. And I would just like to highlight the the importance of making sure that we provide the necessary educational and training literacy assistance to everyone in the city, but especially for our immigrant neighbors, recently arrived Bostonians. They're really the backbone, immigrants are really the backbone of our city, and we want to try to provide them with as much services and support as we possibly can. I want to recognize Yusuf from the Immigration Office for exceptional work that he and his team is doing as well. No further comments, Councilor Flaherty, thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Flynn. Chair recognizes Councilor Liz Braden. I think we may have lost Liz, and if she comes back, we will get right to her. So with that, we're going to turn right over to the first panel. And I also know that we have, after Lee Holler, we do have an additional panelist, and that's Edith Bailey. I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing it wrong, but Edith will be joining us in testifying after Lee. So with that, we're going to start with the administration. Trin, obviously, if you want to kick it off, I know you're joined by Kristen, Yusufi, and Jennifer, so you have the lead.
Great, thank you. Can everyone hear me? Great, thank you.
Yes, we can, loud and clear. Yep.
Great. Good afternoon, Councillor Flynn, Councillor Bach, Councillor Braden, and special thanks to Councillor Mejia for sponsoring the Ordinance and Task Force, and Councillor Flaherty, yourself, Chair of Government Operations. I'm so pleased that the Council is seriously considering this ordinance, Docket 0600, an ordinance to create a task force to address literacy rates in the city of Boston. My name is Trin Nguyen, Director of the Mayor's Office of Workforce Development and Office of Financial Empowerment. I'm happy to be joined by my colleagues from the city as well, who you will hear more about their work. This is a very personal issue, and also task force and effort for me. As many of you know, I came here as an immigrant and refugee from Saigon, lived in a refugee camp, and was sponsored by Catholic Charities in the Midwest. My parents came here as dishwashers for 30 years, not knowing a word of English, and did not have access to resources to make it work. And so learning from my personal experience and theirs and my colleagues and everyone's immigrant experiences, we really try hard to build pathways and provide good, trusted, quality services for the residents of Boston. I have been in this role since 2014, and previously I had the honor of serving the late Mayor Menino as his Chief of Staff at the Boston Housing Authority. And in these two roles, adult and youth literacy were the utmost priority. Literacy is essential to the success of education, career, and economic mobility, especially those who are among the most marginalized residents of our city. As some of you may know, since 1983, the Office of Workforce Development, formerly known as Jobs and Community Services, JCS, it has operated the Adult Literacy Initiative, ALI, to provide adult education services to the residents of Boston in need of such services. These services consist of adult basic education, also known as ABE, basic literacy and numeracy for native English speakers, English for speakers of other languages, also known as ESOL, for non-native English speakers, and high school credentials known as GED and HiSET in preparation for both. These courses also may include digital literacy, work readiness, specific occupational skills training, and citizenship. The services are provided by a variety of community-based organizations across Boston's neighborhoods. For more information, you can also visit www.ali.boston.gov. This website was created by OWD in the last 6 years. It has an updated, consolidated resource network that includes nonprofit partners classes, options, links to resources, slots, events, reports, graduation, and other relevant news for training providers and intermediaries. OWD and the Boston Private Industry Council, also known as the PIC, work with the Massachusetts Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, DESE, on the public comment, research and data, needs assessment, review and evaluation, integration of workforce development, and general operation of the Adult Literacy Initiative. DESE with the state represents the major source of funding for these programs. Additionally, several programs receive support from the city's Community Development Block Grant, CDBG, and Neighborhood Jobs Trust, NJT, funds as administered by OWD. Some directly and some through an OWD grant to intermediaries such as English for New Bostonians with my colleagues here and SkillsWorks at the Boston Foundation. For this current fiscal year, which is also FY22, major highlights for the city's ABE ESOL program include, after the state Senate submitted its budget to the conference committee and prior to the governor's approval of this final state budget, the total amount of funding designated for Boston's ABE ESOL program for this year was adjusted from $9.4 million to $9.7 million, mainly due to the mayor, the city, and our office and colleagues and partners' advocacy to include more money into ABE and ESOL. This added 10 ABE seats and 45 ESOL slots, subject to final state and federal appropriation. And we're moving forward with this budget and programming for our nonprofit partners. The other effort we're doing is using primary metrics to determine funding allocations by programs are often demonstrated by performance, administrative responsiveness, and capacity to meet and increase service level. Therefore, a total of 21 organizations administers 28 distinct programs. 16 of them are ESOL and 12 of them are adult basic education throughout the city of Boston. Again, this is on our ALI website. These programs serve approximately 3,000 Boston residents annually. A summary of the programs, including funding outlook for this year, is available upon request. In addition to these ongoing efforts, we know this is not enough due to COVID. OWD is currently implementing two recent initiatives. The first is to support a community of practice program that provides funding, builds capacity, and technical assistance to ESOL programs that offer level 3 and 4 classes with bridge programs into Career Pathways Workforce Development Training Program. The second recent development is launching a digital literacy fund that integrates IT solutions into ESL classes, as we have seen the detriment from the COVID pandemic era. So I'm happy to speak to you further on these recent developments at another time. While these resources and services may seem a lot, many needs and challenges remain. We can all agree that we need to do much more, including the scaling of best practice models so that we can serve more Boston residents efficiently, increasing state budgets and the federal line items to get more money into ESL and ABE classes. We need to reduce additional barriers to success and entry into these programs, as we know that housing, quality, childcare, food access, etc., are interdisciplinary issues that residents face as barriers to getting into these classes and finishing them. We continue to advocate in both the legislature for progressive bills and money to support adult literacy in Boston and throughout the state. We will prioritize and measure the success of our work to ensure that we're providing quality curriculum, services, and programs to our residents. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have, and that is my final presentation. Thank you for listening, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Trin, and thank you for all the work you do for our workforce development on behalf of the city. Kristen DeVolio, Senior Director of the Adult Learning Center. Kristen, you welcome, good afternoon, and could you please give us your comments?
Thank you for having me. I do have a few slides I would like to share. Is the share screen open?
Candace, can Kristen can you facilitate that for Kristen? Perfect.
Yeah, it's working.
Thank you.
So Trin spoke broadly about the services available in Boston, and I would like to share a little bit about what the Boston Public Schools does on behalf of adults in the city. So we run a number of programs. We do have adult basic education classes, which serves students with a grade level equivalency of 4 through grade 8. We have an adult diploma pathway program, which allows adults to earn a high school diploma. We have college and career transition programs. We're currently partnering with Bunker Hill Community College and Roxbury Community College for our students to be duly enrolled in our high school program while also earning college credits. We run ESOL programming and family literacy programming. We have a whole course of high school classes where adults can either finish their high school classes that they began or start completely new. We do HiSET testing. We have integrated education workforce development. We have a culinary and a CNA program. We've just started a welding and an HVAC program. And we also offer online classes for students to develop their technology skills, financial literacy skills, and high school skills. Our capacity at BPS is a total of 605 students. We have 45 seats during the daytime. We have 2 programs, a daytime program and an evening program. During the day, we're able to offer 45 students whose reading level is grade 4 through 8. And then in the evening, we're able to accommodate 30 students whose reading level is grades 4 through 8. For students who are at the high school skill level, we are able to serve a total of 330 students, and we're able to serve 200 ESOL students across our 2 programs. Many of our students come to us and stay for quite a while. They start as English language learners and then work through our program and eventually graduate from high school. This past June, we were able to graduate 61 students with a BPS high school diploma. Our youngest graduate was 21 and our oldest graduate was 55. And part of that process is supporting these adult students who have been out of school for quite some time in passing the MCAS. This is one of the largest barriers for our adults in earning their high school diploma. As of right now, for this upcoming year, we have already identified 45 students who, if they persist in our program over the next few months, will be able to earn a high school diploma by June 2022. Despite these successes, our students face many challenges, and our students who are reading at the grade level 4 through 8 are our students who have the largest struggle staying in school and persisting with the programs. As Trin mentioned, some of the challenges that our students face are transportation. They don't have the money to take the bus 5 days a week. It limits them in the number of times they can come to class. They have technology and internet access struggles. We do partner with Tech Goes Home, and many of our students were able to receive Chromebooks, but once at home, they don't always have internet access. We had students who were taking classes by driving to the public library and parking in the parking lot or going to stores with free Wi-Fi in order to take our online classes during the pandemic. Childcare is another big issue for our students. So even if they are able to come to class, they have trouble getting their homework done and then just meeting the needs of their students, of their own children while completing school. Many of our students need additional one-on-one support, and so access to tutors is a challenge. We do partner with Boston Partners in Education, and they are able to provide some tutors for us, but not as many tutors as our students need. Many of our students have inflexible work schedules, and so they are unable to, we're unable to offer classes that meet their exact schedule. So although we offer classes Monday through Friday, 9 to 2, and then again, Tuesday and Thursday, 5 to 9:30, and Monday and Wednesday in the evening as well, it's hard for our students to create a schedule that matches with their work schedule. This becomes a barrier to them completing the program. Our students have always had social emotional needs, and we are noticing after the return to school this year, after the pandemic, that many of our students have even more mental health challenges than they had pre the pandemic. And of course, there's the housing and food insecurity issues where our students are moving around a lot, which makes it more difficult for them to get to our school. Some of them are living in homeless shelters. And so just having a stable home environment for them to get their work done and to study is challenging. Some of the supports that we offer to our students are that we are able to give our students under the age of 22 bus passes. This allows them to get to school. Like I mentioned before, we have the tutors from Boston Partners in Education. They do have access to weekly COVID testing, which is helping us to keep our doors open and our students safe. We were recently able to hire a student support specialist who is following up on student retention, making phone calls to students when they're absent, helping them access the resources they need to persist in the program. We also have 2 part-time guidance counselors, but we do need more with our student population. It's just not enough for our students to be able to meet with somebody a few times a year to make sure they're on the right track. And we do have 1 academic advisor for our day program. In order to get all of this work done, we also partner with local programs. We partner with UMass Nutrition. They offer nutrition classes for our ESOL classes, both in the day and evening program. As I mentioned earlier, we are partnering with Roxbury Community College and Bunker Hill Community College for dual enrollment. We work closely with MassHire for our ESL level 3 and 4 students and our students close to graduation to help them find jobs and training programs. We work closely with Tech Goes Home, and this fall we're able to offer 5 classes to our students. So we're giving out close to 70 Chromebooks to our students who need those devices. We do work with English for New Bostonians. They're one of our funders, and we're also creating a new program starting in December around food manufacturing for level 1 and 2 students. And then we partner with Jewish Vocational Services, and we support 130 students over there earning their high school diplomas. So that is a little bit about what we do here at BPS. And I'm open to answering any questions anyone has. And I'm excited to be a part of this group.
Okay. Thank you, Kristen, for your presentation. Also, thank you for the work that you're doing. Next up is Yusufi. Yusufi, you want?
Thank you so much, Councillor Flaherty.
Good afternoon. Good to see you, Yusufi.
Good afternoon. Great seeing you. And I want to just thank you and all of our councillors here, Councillor Mejia, Councillor Bach, Councillor Flynn, Councillor Burden, for just all your advocacy and support on this issue. Yeah, and I also really want to thank my colleagues, Director Trini again, and also Kristen from BPS for all the work that they do, as well as Jennifer, Director of LCA here with us today. Trin and Kristen have covered the work that we really do around literacy here at the city, and it is extraordinary work. You know, I think the only thing that I want to point out here is that there's 2 aspects to this docket. There's the literacy barrier for those who struggle with any language, right? And those are folks that come here because even in their own languages aren't necessarily even written languages, right? So I'm thinking of, for instance, Somali, or in some cases of Haitian Creole, Cape Verdean Creole. These are recent languages that are being written down. And then there's a second aspect, which is English literacy for those who are learning English as a language. And Trin and Kristen have spoken just beautifully to the work that's happening and the investment that's continued to be required. I think that in terms of the first kind of issue, I think the important piece to recognize there is that our immigrant communities are really diverse and have different situation needs and literacy levels. And so we really have to meet our immigrant communities where they're at. So for instance, Haitian Creole is a language that is being written down more now. And we know that many Haitians, particularly the ones that are asylum seekers coming up from the border now, don't necessarily read or write. And so I think we have to meet folks like that where they're at. And so here at in the city, and what Moya's been working on is making sure we have Haitian Creole capacity on our team, working with ONS, working with Haitian media, and especially working with our nonprofit partners to really ensure that they're able to access the services and programs here. I think this task force should focus on both of these pieces, and I'm just really excited to be a part of this with such esteemed colleagues to figure out these challenges and figure out how we can make more investments to support our immigrant communities. Thank you so much, Councillor.
Thank you, Yusufi, and you nailed it. We had a forum this weekend led by the African diaspora of the community with the tremendous Somali presence, and the issues that you've talked about were the issues that they presented. I know both Councillor Mejia and I were present, and we hear the community loud and clear. So look forward to continued partnership, and thanks for the work that you're doing on behalf of the immigrant community. And at this time, the chair recognizes Jennifer Viva Wong, who's the Director of Office of Language and Communication Access.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, counselors. I wanted to just say thank you for the opportunity to be involved in this great work. Especially thank you to Councilor Mejia, as we worked very closely together on the ordinance for our office. And I know that this was something that was very important and crucial for us. I wanted to also thank Director Trin and Kristen from BPS for leading and being champions in this space. And I really look forward to working together, especially UCC with all the great points. I just wanted to echo everything that everyone has been saying and figuring out how best we as an office can support both of both the work from BPS and OWD and be able to support all the investments and being able to find out how we can work in this board and support and move forward all the great work that's currently present.
Thank you very much, Jennifer, and for the work you're doing in language communication access. I see that we've been rejoined by my colleague, City Councilor Liz Braden. So Liz, if you're providing you're not experiencing any technical difficulties, you want to just give a brief opening statement before we start our next panel.
No, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to everyone who's here. It's good to see some familiar faces. This is really an incredibly important work, and I'm doing what I can now to support our adult education community out here in Alston Brighton, but every neighbourhood has different challenges and every language group has different challenges, but ultimately, the goal is to equip as many people as possible with language skills and literacy skills so that they can succeed and make a better life for themselves and their family here in the United States and in Boston. So there's lots of new job opportunities coming along with new lab development and all, with work jobs at all sorts of levels. So I feel this is a moment where this work's just becoming increasingly more important. And if we want to equip these residents of Boston with the skills that they can get into this job market and take advantage of it, it's really important. So thank you all.
Thank you, Councilor Braden, and well said. And we're going to introduce our second panel now, and then we'll hold questions we can have for both panels. So Dr. Gail Crump-Swaby, Associate Professor of Counseling, Clinical Mental Health, Counseling Coordinator at Springfield College. You have the floor if you can start off our second panel. I don't see, she's no longer on the screen, so I'm going to go to Elizabeth Santiago, the founder of the Untold Narratives. Welcome, Liz. You have the floor.
Hi, thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you, Councillor Flaherty, for introducing me, and thank you, Councillor Mejia, for all your work on establishing this task force, and to all the others who have spoken. Thank you for your support and leadership. My name is Elizabeth Santiago. I have been living in the city of Boston my entire life. My interest in literacy is personal, as some of the other members have described already. I grew up in a family where most of the folks did not graduate from high school. I was the first in my family to go to college, and that situation inspired me to focus on literacy and the ways in which reading can sort of be more of a liberatory experience. Many of us look at literacy as a means or pathways into work or further education. And I look at it as a means for cultivating voice and a sense of identity, especially for those communities and those people who have been marginalized in some way. So it's very important for me to participate on this task force and to participate in this work in some way. I do want to share that I have been involved in literacy work for the past 25 years, working with the State Literacy Resource Center out of World Education 25 years ago, and then running the Adult Basic Education Center at the Harriet Tubman House, which is, as far as I can tell, is no longer in existence. I recently finished a doctoral work focused on adult literacy, and the title of my dissertation was Strengthening and Deepening Literacy Skills of adults in high school equivalency programs focusing on creative writing, which was the impetus for a website that I developed called The Untold Narratives. And that website is free to anyone who would like to use it, but it's meant to be a space where folks can cultivate their voice and learn the craft of writing without feeling that shame of not being able to actually be perfectly literate, being able to express themselves in some way. So I do think that this is an extremely important initiative, and I'm happy to be here and a part of it.
Thank you very much. Next up is Lee Holler.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much. Lee Holler, the Director of Programs for English for New Bostonians, which I'll say ENB for short. So English for New Bostonians, ENB, is the city's partner in creating opportunities for immigrants to learn English and pursue their educational, economic, and civic aspirations. ENB was spearheaded by the Mayor's Office for Immigrant Advancement 20 years ago, and we're now an independent nonprofit that is supported in part by Mejia and by the Neighborhood Jobs Trust under the Office of Workforce Development. We provide citywide ESOL coordination, program support, teacher training, piloting and evaluation of customized initiatives such as workplace, parent, and entrepreneurs ESOL, plus oversight to enable 18 high caliber ESOL programs to serve immigrant job seekers, parents, and small business owners. ENB also collects data and best practice analysis. We share findings across adult education and workforce development fields. So I've been with ENB for 12 years, but about myself, before that, I was an adult ESOL teacher in Boston. And for more than 10 years, I taught specialized ESOL, and that's English for Speakers of Other Languages, classes for adults with limited formal education in their native countries. I was very excited to learn of this proposed ordinance. Some of my students had never held a pencil before my class, and most had a range of schooling backgrounds from 0 to 6 years. They were learning English, and they were also learning to read and write for the first time in English. Now, through ENB, I train and coach teachers of basic literacy ESOL in Boston and statewide. From this background, I have 3 thoughts I'd like to share with you today in support of the creation of this task force to address literacy rates in the city of Boston. So first, adults with limited literacy, especially those who are also non-native English speakers, are uncounted or they're counted inaccurately. Second, they are a diverse group, as Yusufi said. And third, with thoughtful support, they can be very successful participants in the workforce and in all areas of civic life. So first, about counting. There have been several national studies of adult literacy rates, although none in the past 10 years, as Councillor Mejia noted in the proposed ordinance. That cited the Center for Education Statistics National Assessment of Adult Literacy's 2003 figure that 1 in 5 US adults struggle with being able to read and write in English. Another study, PIAC, in 2011 also found 1 in 5 and differentiated that by nativity, by whether people were born in the US or born in another country. PIAC found that people born outside the United States are overrepresented in that 1 in 5. That is, that English literacy rates are lower among people born outside the US. However, both of those studies crucially failed to differentiate between English literacy and literacy in general in any language. And it's that distinction that is so important and that I was thrilled to see in this proposed ordinance. So that is that a doctor or a lawyer who is a new immigrant and hasn't learned any English yet, that person cannot yet read and write well in English, but they belong in a different group from someone who has never learned to read and write in any language, but too often they're conflated and counted together. So the proposed ordinance aims to start by studying literacy rates in Boston, and this is absolutely needed. From English for New Bostonians' own 21 data about students in the English classes that we support, 5% had from 0 to 2 years of formal education in their native language, and another 5% had from 3 to 5 years. So they're a strong population that we work with in our English classes. About the diversity of adults with limited literacy, I would note that not only do they come to Boston from a wide range of countries and language backgrounds, as Yusufi noted, but there's a wide variety of reasons why their education was limited. For some, it was cut off by war, or there were limited family funds to pay for schooling, or some had to take care of younger siblings, or some had brothers who went to school, but they were a girl, so they didn't have that opportunity. One of my students wore glasses in my class, and she said when she was a child, she couldn't see the board. She fell behind, and the classrooms in her country were very big with 40 or 50 students, and the weaker students had to sit in the back. So once she fell behind a little bit, she got more and more lost until eventually she dropped out. Finally, about success, I'd like to leave you with a few visions of what successfully reaching those adults can look like in terms of their access to the workforce and to city services. One of my students worked as a cleaner at the airport, where after cleaning a restroom, she had to sign the card on the back of the door with her name and the date and time. And her manager was supportive, but she couldn't do that. And she really wanted to do that. She learned to sign those cards in my class. And the night that she came in, she said, I signed. She was really happy to be able to perform that job duty. Another student learned to spell her children's names in my class so that she could call the school when her child was sick and spell their name for the school secretary. The number one reason that people in my classes said they wanted to learn and read and write better was to be more independent. And that took many different forms. Yes, applying for jobs, attaining jobs, and staying in jobs. And also things like taking the bus without fear of getting lost, doing laundry in the basement of their apartment building, being able to confidently navigate the laundry room, passing the learner's permit test, learning about health and nutrition for the first time and about what's inside their bodies that they've never been taught, reading with their children. All of these are challenging to someone who doesn't speak English, but very much more difficult if someone also doesn't read and write well in any language. Once their needs were identified and they had appropriately specialized help, my students reached successes in all of these and many more areas. So again, we at English for New Bostonians are thrilled to learn of this proposed ordinance and look forward to being of any help we can in this effort. Thank you very much, councilors, for your time considering this important issue.
Thank you very much, Lee. And we're also joined by Edith, and I believe it's Basil, if I'm pronouncing it correctly. Edith, welcome.
That's fine, Councillor Flaherty. Thank you for hosting this. I'm so happy to be here. And I thank Councillor Mejia for her visionary leadership. My name is Edith Basil, and I've spent 32 years in Boston Public Schools in special education, but also in ELA in literacy. But I'd like to share a lived experience, which I think is more impactful in this situation. So I grew up with 13 siblings in Boston, pre-desegregation, during desegregation, and went back to work in Boston Public Schools. I had siblings who struggled with literacy. Some of them were smarter than me, but they did not get the help that they needed. I did an internship at Northeastern University where I went into Norfolk Prison to tutor inmates who were struggling with literacy. My first student was a 35-year-old who had already served 15 years of a life sentence, who was struggling with reading. Also provided support in literacy to individuals who were in drug treatment centers. Right now, I am retired from Boston Public Schools. I work with DYS and address the needs of DYS incarcerated youth who come from Boston who are still reading despite being in high school at the 3rd, 5th grade level. So this problem is not new. It also is not new that it is situated and impacts Black and Brown students. We also have immigrant students at a higher number now who are struggling with literacy. This is a problem that has not been solved, but has to have a systemic solution in creating an infrastructure. I appreciate looking at literacy in the city of Boston, but what we know for sure is that students who are not taught to read in school become adults who struggle with literacy and become parents who struggle with literacy and face barriers in housing, in employment, in accessing city services. So this is a critical issue that needs to be resolved. What we know for sure is that in 2000, the National Reading Panel came up with a body of research that really informed how reading can be taught. We know that 1 in 5 students, 20% of our population struggles with reading. And we know that when these students come to school and are taught one way, they do not respond, they don't get the intervention or the alternative methods that they need. We call many of these students neurodiverse. Typically in Boston Public Schools, they have been, after they have failed for many years, put in special education and still have not received the help. We have the information to teach anyone how to read. I've worked in adult literacy where I've taught someone as old as almost 80 years old how to read for the first time. It's exciting. But my point is that this is a problem that can be solved. I'm so excited that Councilor Mejia has come up with this ordinance. I'm so excited, Councilor Flaherty, that you are sponsoring this in order to have a real discussion, because it is an intergenerational problem that can be solved. We need to be proactive and preventative. I know that this is about ensuring that everyone in the city of Boston are literate. We need to apply the tools and strategies to address those who are struggling. But I also say that there needs to be a partnership with Boston Public Schools in being proactive and preventative at the point where students enter school, whether it's pre-kindergarten or whether they come here as an immigrant at the high school level, and really universally screen them and determine where they are in terms of literacy, and then apply the tools that research has informed us are successful and are replicable in getting the results so our citizens in the city of Boston can function and access city services. So I thank you so much for having this discussion today.
Thank you very much, Edith, for your input. And I'm going to just start it off and just get right into just 3 quick questions that I have before we turn it over to the lead sponsor, my colleagues, and it's open to whoever is best suited, I guess, is who will be responsible for appointing the members of the task force? What is the imagined task force role and interaction with the school committee? And is the stipend in line with other stipends that are provided other sort of committee or task force members in the city? So I'll throw that over to whoever is from the administration is best suited to answer those ones.
Councilor, I think those are great questions, and just to be very transparent, I think we'd want to have an internal conversation before getting back to you on that piece. And as you also know, there is going to be a transition soon. So in good faith, I think it would be right to give you an answer after the transition.
I defer to, this is Trin from OWD. I agree with my colleague Yusufi, but I do want to throw out support for this effort. So OWD can be happy to be the fiscal agent of whatever you need us to do to make sure that board members' notes and administrative support can be provided, and also any stipends or fiscal transactions that need to be done. We are happy to volunteer to be a fiscal agent, mainly because we have housed ALI, the Adult Literacy Initiative, for the last 26 years. 8 years, we've provided lots of technical assistance and capacity for the back end for 30 programs. So we're happy to provide any support that's needed.
Thank you, Yusufi, and thank you, Trin. And then with that, I'll turn it over to the lead sponsor, Julie Mejia, for questions that she may have of either panel.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, everyone. So I guess, we've received some preliminary feedback from the administration and advocates as to who ought to serve on this task force. But for us, we wanted to create space for everyone to come forward and brainstorm ideas on how else, to be in the space. So I just wanted to note, I do appreciate the question, and I'm hoping that I'm going to assume this is not going to be the first and only working session, but that we'll be able to walk out of here with some sense of direction. We've heard so far from the Office of Language and Communications and English for New Bostonians. I'm curious, more specifically, for Kristen, how long does the average student participate in your program?
That's a good question, and that's a question all of our students ask us when they enter our doors. How long is this going to take me? And it depends on a lot of things. It depends on how much school they've had in the past. It depends on whether or not they had schooling in their first language. It depends on whether their fluency language level is in English. It depends on how they are as test takers. So we have students we just graduated a student last year. She was with us for 13 years. She came as a refugee from Somalia, and she went through our entire ESL program and then our ABE program, and then she did our high school program with us. So she 12 years for school, she went through 13 years with us. And then we have other students who come and, they need a few credits and some help passing the MCAS and some, reading strategy skills, and they're out in 6 months. I would say the average student who comes to us at a 7th or 8th grade reading level, they graduate in about 4 years. And our ESL students are with us, depends on whether they have a high school diploma from their home country, how long they stay with us, how quickly they get a job. We do have literacy classes for students who are learning English. And so students who are in that class stay with us longer because they do want to stay to learn to read and write. So although their oral language is higher, they will stay with us until they feel comfortable in their reading and writing skills. It really, really depends on the student and the time they have and their skills coming in.
I'm just curious, when learning a new language and learning to read and write, we know it takes a long time, and that is part of the reason why we're trying to explore ways to provide services to people who cannot read or write in any language. And I talk about the fact that my mom didn't go beyond 3rd grade and struggled with reading and writing even in her native language, which is why I was able to get away with a lot because I was the official translator. So I'm curious if you guys have seen any connection between even just when recent arrivals and students who are coming to this country for the first time and their parents are adult learners, what kind of supports and what type of programs exist, if any, to kind of do assessments for some of these parents who are coming into this country?
Is this question for me at BPS or everyone?
Because you are a part of BPS, and it could be a hybrid. I think this is an all hands-on approach regarding the situation. I'm just thinking specifically about my mom, right, who didn't know how to read and write in English and struggled even in her native language. What type of supports and systems are put in place for parents like this who are trying to navigate the education system?
So here at BPS, when the students come to register, they go through the Family Resource Center. And I don't work in that division, but we do work closely with them where we share all of our classes and information. They're familiar with our application process, and they're able to refer any families that need services to us. And then those parents do get priority in our seat. They don't do any initial assessment of the parents there. They'll refer them to us. And if the parents then come to us, then we will do an assessment of them at that point.
Okay. So I'm just curious about section 12-17.3, titled Responsibilities and Authorities of the Task Force. outlined several different things that the task force should do to make progress in this space. And I'm curious, what do you feel, what, if anyone could just share, what do you feel is missing, or what do you feel is not necessary in this paragraph? This could be for anyone.
Council, could you just repeat, if you don't mind, the section again?
Yeah, so section 1217.3, titled Responsibilities and Authorities of the Task Force, outlines several different things that the task force should do to make progress in this space. And I'm just curious, what do you feel is missing, or what do you feel is not necessary in this paragraph?
I have one thought, if I may. I think accessibility of other city services, accessibility of the food services and housing and things like that are a separate kind of issue from access to educational services to help those adults build their skills. So I think people need both. Like they need pathways to improve their literacy and education and English skills, and then they also need to be able to access other kinds of city services in spite of having limited reading and writing skills.
Oh, I believe.
Yeah, Julie, you were on mute.
Yeah, I'm having some technical difficulties. I believe that is all. Let me just, I think that is all for now.
Very good. Chair recognizes Kenzie Bach in order of arrival. Kenzie, any questions of either panel?
Yeah, thanks so much, Councillor Flaherty. This is a question I think a number of speakers sort of alluded to this, so I just wanted to get thoughts from anybody. But I mean, it strikes me that what Councillor Mejia is trying to do here, right, is really kind of help us make a phase shift in how many people were able to really help on the literacy front. And I know, Trin, early in your remarks, you made a reference to kind of best practices and us investing some more funds in, helping support our partners and make sure that we've got really like high quality programs that we're supporting. And a number of the teachers sort of referred to focus pedagogy and the one-on-one tutoring. And I just know from my personal life, not a literacy challenge, but that I once took classes in Chinese that were very kind of desultory. And then I took classes in Chinese that were like very focused on really teaching me the system, and that like I was retaining very little, like, in the first set and learning a lot in this latter. And I guess I think to that point about how long it takes people, obviously for us to really move the needle with literacy rates in the city, we would need the kind of like consistent high impact programming that meets these students where they are, which, as you guys described, is a lot of different places depending on, whether they've ever learned to read another language or not. And so I guess I was wondering, because I know it's been like, we have this conversation all the time on the early childhood education side about not just seats, but high quality seats. And I wonder if you all could give us a bit of insight into where you think a task force like this should focus on ensuring that we kind of have really high quality literacy programming that lets us really kind of ramp up the outcomes for people.
I think for me, staffing these positions is not always easy, because the teachers who have the expertise in reading and second language instruction are certified DESE teachers and can work and as a K-12 teacher and make a lot more money. And so we are left with the people who are either retired and are wanting to do this work, or, you know, just genuinely interested in working with adults. But I think this is really an area of specialization, and you want teachers who have been trained reading specialists to do this work with experience working with adults. And those people are hard to find.
I also think, sorry.
No. I was just gonna ask, what do you think? Like, what is it about? Is it about pay? Is it about creating a teacher training institute to get more of those people to exist? I mean, but if you want to, we can come back, Kristen, Edith, if you want to jump in.
I was just going to say that it really needs to be a purpose-driven literacy framework, honoring the dignity of where citizens are and who they are, and so that they're sort of leading their own learning, at the same time being culturally responsive and understanding the language issues that may be challenging and being able to address them in their native language at some point. So I see this as multidimensional, but also having individuals who are, well, somewhat trained in the use of science of reading, but also understand how non-English speaking individuals can be taught reading as well, and supporting their native language. So it is going to take a little bit of work to have targeted support for the populations that we're talking about, and to ensure that we are, you know, moving the needle in terms of their progress in developing literacy.
Thank you, Edith. This is Trin. Councillor Bach, I really appreciate that question, which is why I deeply, with my colleagues here, deeply appreciate Councillor Mejia for developing this ordinance for a task force. I mean, I think that throughout the city, through my 8 years of just specifically working with a adult literacy initiative, it has been, you know, with all due respect, all over the place. I mean, we've had efforts from various pockets of the city. We have social impact bonds. That's a national leader with Jewish Vocational Services. But we've also have mom and pop, and also specialized cultural appropriate tailored programs to meet students and residents where they are. And so all of that is really important. The question is, how do we consolidate them in an organized way that's based on evaluation and research and evidence-based practices? I'm not championing one model or one approach to the other. I just think that there is a chance for us to come together to organize a lot of these subcategories within a very complicated space, such as the literacy space for adult and youth. And that is to go back to what Kristen's answer is when Councilor Mejia asked, well, how long, what's the average time frame in which a student completes, you know, ESL levels 1, 2, and 3, for example. And, you know, there's not a standard way of even answering that question. Is because of the initial assessment level. And then for OWD and Adult Literacy Initiative, 8 years ago, we have reorganized for good, bad, or ugly. We have reorganized the Adult Literacy Initiative to comply to DESE, which is the leading state entity for metrics and learning gains. And so we've just focused on programs with those metrics to report out so that we can articulate a unified state-backed research outcomes. I'm not saying that's the best way. I'm just saying that was one way in which OWD could organize a subset of the Adult Literacy Initiative. There's much more in the space, and I really appreciate the opportunity that this task force can start dissecting this, of course, with financial resources and consultants and research to really lay this out. And so that's a long-winded answer to say that this is a major task for the task force.
Great. Thank you so much, Trin. Yeah, I just think that's got to be the that's got to be the focus of an effort like this. I think Councillor Mejia always talks about, us having the same conversations over and over, right? And so it's like, how do we make pulling everybody together additive in a way that really like gets to results? Because I think for people, the way I think about it is like, I think somebody on the panel, and I'm so sorry that I've forgotten who, referred to the fact that like anybody can learn to read, right? And I think that's so important to focus on, because I think that's in some of our kind of, and Trin, you can say whether you agree or not, but I feel like in some of our workforce development like worlds, there are types of things where like, you run a program and you don't know if someone's going to have aptitude for it. And so the idea is like, oh, well, we'll take a bunch of people in and like some of them will really take to welding and some of them will learn from this that they didn't want to be a welder, right? And that's sort of like fine outcomes wise. But I feel like with this, you don't want to have the outlook of like, oh, some people are meant to become literate and others aren't, because all of the pedagogy tells us that if people have the right supports, they can learn to read, right? And so I just really want to make sure that we use this opportunity Councillor Mejia is proposing to make sure that we're not just focused on having seats in literacy programs, but we're focused on having those, to Edith's point, be really well tailored to the population they're serving, and then have people coming out of them, with these new literacy skills. So that would be my big focus. And Councillor Mejia, I don't know enough to know if there are other stakeholders that should be on the task force, but certainly the list that you put together made a lot of sense to me. And I think somebody, sorry, I just lost, I don't have the full screen up today, but I think it was Liz or Lee, somebody said about the sort of two different outcomes. And I agree with you that the question of accessibility of city services for low literacy is different from increasing literacy rates. But I do think Councillor Mejia would like this task force to think about both those things, right? So I think that's an intentional duality. But I see Edith's hand is up.
Well, I just wanted to make a quick comment because I think it has to be asset-based. So you're dealing with adults who have histories, who have a voice, who have done work in the community, who have an identity. And so really kind of, figuring out where are they in this literacy continuum. They may be struggling with reading, but they do have forms of literacy, and acknowledging that and coming from a strength-based perspective, but also cultivating within this model, if that's what you want to call it, those who can begin to lead because they've had the experience and now they are reading so they can maybe come back and help others. So motivation is an important piece. I know that when I worked with adults, I had one client who wanted to write a letter to his girlfriend. That was motivation. So, or someone else wanted to be able to read a book that a relative wrote. And so, really kind of like what is having a purpose-driven approach for these adults who come in with a body of knowledge already and strengths, and helping them to get to that next level, I think is important.
Great, thanks so much. Mr. Chairman, I think those are all my questions.
Thank you, Councilor Bach. Is Councilor Flynn still with us? Councilor Flynn, any questions of the panel?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Councilor Flaherty. I enjoyed the conversation and learning a lot, and especially want to say thank you to the panelists for the excellent work you're doing, helping so many people across our city and state. I heard the comment made by Edith saying she was able to help a older person, maybe he was 80 years old, to learn to read. I don't think there's a better accomplishment you could possibly have than helping someone that age learn to read and write. So thank you, Edith. So I guess my question is, and I focused on trying to help our immigrant neighbors, immigrant families coming into the city. How would this task force benefit immigrant families when the parent may not speak English, and the child may not speak English, and the child may also have disabilities as well, or maybe the parent does. It takes the whole family really to be educated, to be literate. how would we make sure we get the services to the parent and the child almost at the same time, so that the parent can have an impact on the child during their child's school, during the child's education? And anyone could take that, whoever would like to weigh in.
English for New Bostonians has an ESOL for Parents initiative the parents are learning English, and they have kids in BPS or in early education. And the curriculum of the classes is around things like how to read report cards, how to have a conference with your child's teacher, what are expectations of parents in terms of schools in the United States. We currently support 4 programs doing that and 8 classes total, and there is a need for a great deal more, and additionally for more specialization of that according to level. And going back to Councillor Bach's question about quality, that would be my main comment about quality, that education services need to be differentiated by level. That's true for kids, and it's true for adults, and it's true about their English level, and then also about their literacy level. And one example is students, as Ms. Basile said, coming from a strength-based approach and working with people's strengths, when students were in a class together just with people who also had limited reading and writing skills, their speaking and listening skills could take off in English, because they weren't, if I was teaching speaking and listening and I wasn't using print materials, they weren't held back by not understanding the print, and they could learn to speak much faster. So it serves nobody to have the doctor in the same classroom as somebody who never went to school. And differentiating by level offers the opportunity to also offer specialized services like ESL for parents that whole families can benefit from.
And just to add, thank you so much, Lee, and really appreciate all the incredible work, by the way, EMB does. I think, Councilor Finn, we have to meet people where they're at in the situation you're describing. And I think if we're truly about equity in the city, I think a great example of that is the new school committee member, Rafaela Garcia, right? And how we are shifting systems to accommodate, a primarily Spanish-speaking, school committee member, right? And so to the extent that we can bring in people with the skill set, the language skill set, to be able to serve our parents and our students in their native language, I think those are some of the steps that we have to take. And I think we also have to recognize in that our immigrant communities are incredibly resilient. So I know when I moved to this country, I stayed at my auntie's house first. And it was really my auntie who really worked with my mother to really understand, and my father to really understand how the school system worked. And then it was based on what my cousin was going through that I was learning all kinds of different things. So I think it's also tapping into the incredible resiliency and resources that our immigrant communities have that's really important. So. And thank you for that wonderful question, Councilor.
I think just to piggyback on what Lee said, front loading having that strength-based approach and front loading with success, because I think what you just described is success begets success. So that entry point of, you can have discussions, you have a lot of language, we're going to introduce the words that represent what you're saying, or, having some entry point that is a success-driven process. And also, it's really, really important for adults to know why they are, what they're struggling with, and setting their own priorities. So I want to increase my literacy because I want to, as Lee indicated, read my child's report card, or maybe I need to access city services. So that piece is really important to individualize how you begin to work with that person, and also have some sort of accurate screening approach so you'll know what their strengths are. So what is the tool that you're going to use to assess where they are in literacy? Because you need to measure all of that, the multiple literacies that they may possess. Even though they struggle with reading, there are literacies and strengths that they have in that area.
Well, thank you to the entire panel for being here, and again for the important work you do in the community, in the city, in the state, really. We appreciate it. Councillor Flaherty and Councillor Mejia, I don't have any further comments or questions.
Thank you, Councillor Flynn. Chair recognizes Councillor Liz Braden. Liz, if you're with us.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I really want to appreciate Edith for her holding up the importance of just recognizing the assets that people have, and some, if they don't have a literary tradition in their countries of origin, that there's a huge oral literacy tradition in many places where that is passed down from generation to generation. So I really feel that adults setting their own goals and setting their own objectives is really helpful and motivating for everyone. The one concern I have, this may not, and the focus may be entirely on adult literacy. I hope it's not, because one of the biggest challenges for our young people, especially is our students in BPS or any school, if they fall behind, it's like they become further and further to the back of the class, and it's very, very difficult to catch up. They become demotivated and just really challenged to keep going. And so I don't know, this might be a question for Kristen, identifying students who have English is not their first language, obviously, but the challenges of maybe identifying, is it because English is not the first language, or do they have a learning disability? Are we adequately resourcing the assessment and culturally competent assessment of those students so that we can identify if there's some underlying learning disability there, or is it, or what's going on? Sometimes the issue of hearing and vision issues, obviously we screen for those, but is there adequate assessment for those other possibilities that may be impacting a child's ability to learn to read? And I think just celebrating the assets that they have and building confidence in the child as they progress through the school system, so that, okay, English may be a second language, but they have other cultural assets and language in their native tongue that maybe we don't recognize. I'm sort of all over the place with this, but I really feel there's a fundamental issue about assessment and appropriate support for the child at an early stage, so they don't fall behind. Kristen, Edith, maybe I don't know who that goes to. Edith, you've experience with special ed and the SOL, so maybe that's your question.
Yes, I would love to talk about that. Thank you so much. So we've had reading wars for decades. How do we teach children to read? What is the effective methodology to teach all students to read? We have this term dyslexia, which simply means difficulty with word. So in 2018, Massachusetts passed a law, which is a screening law, a dyslexia screening law, where children from the grades of kindergarten to third grade, school districts across the state are required to screen, do universal screening. And the whole purpose is that we know that early literacy is critical. Once a child after third grade, you go from learning to read to reading to learn. So you read across the content areas. You read in science. You have math. You have math words. And so if a child doesn't read early and effectively, accurately, and is able to extract meaning directly from printed text, we know that they're going to struggle because you're in school for 6 hours. Learning is literacy and literacy is learning. And so we see the frustration of children who hide it. There is shame involved in not learning to read. You see all other children reading, easily with ease. And these children are bright, intelligent children. And so the purpose of this whole study, and by the way, DESE passed dyslexia guidelines. I was on the dyslexia stakeholder group, and we use the science of reading. There's a whole, this is actually the body of research. The National Reading Panel put this out in 2000, and it is an evidence-based assessment of scientific reading literature on reading and its implications for reading instruction. So early screening, universal screening, is important because there are 5 components of reading. All children don't struggle with all 5 components. The purpose of the universal screening is to figure out where they struggle, intervene early so that they don't continue to struggle. And, my work in special education has been that there has been a wait to fail model. So sometimes people say, well, let's give them another year. Maybe they'll pick it up in 2nd grade, but we know it doesn't happen. Why? Because children who struggle with reading are what we now call neurodiverse. So when information is processed through the brain, some children process it differently. And so they need a different methodology. They need explicit phonics. They need a systematic, rule-based, step-by-step approach, which is very different from, well, I can pick up a book and I can just read it with little instruction versus a child who needs to be taught how to unlock the codes. This particular letter says this, and when it's combined with a vowel, it says something different. Then if there's a vowel on the end, it becomes a long vowel. So there's so many rules involved. And so we have taught reading in one way. And that one way has left that 1 in 5 students, 20% of our population behind. And those students have, in many cases, ended up in special education. But the problem is once they go into special ed, they still have not gotten these rule-based approaches. And the rule-based approaches are called Orton-Gillingham. It's a very specific methodology where instead of teaching students basic rules, you explicitly teach the step-by-step process of reading. And if you do it early, you can get results. That's what this research from the National Reading Panel tells us, that the early screening is so critical because if you intervene, teach reading differently, which is how these children's brains operate, then that child can go on and, is successful. But if you wait and they're in 4th grade and 5th grade, now you have a child who's acting up, who is not, when there's independent reading, I can't read the book, so I'm going to do something else, and ends up in special ed. So the whole challenge here is to identify these students, give them that block of reading that is different. And sometimes you can do it right in the classroom. So this not a problem. The wait to fail model, because if a child, of course, a lot of this is brain-based research because the brain is what they call plastic and open, vulnerable to different methodology. Once a child gets older, then it's more difficult to teach a child to read. It's like learning a language. You can learn multiple languages when you're young. When you're older, it has to be taught explicitly. So this has been the challenge in Boston Public Schools, but it's not just BPS, it's all over the country. And so if we can nail that, if we can master that, then we can begin to identify students who need a different methodology so that they don't fail and we don't have overrepresentation of students in special ed where they still don't get the support. And then, if you're not successful in school, you have attendance issues. It just is a domino effect that impacts your life. And there are real consequences if we don't get this right. So that's why I'm happy to be here today.
Thank you. Thank you, Edith. I have a family member who had probably undiagnosed dyslexia. And when she was a kid, she always placed herself beside a good reader. And then she would ask them she couldn't read the book, but she would ask them to tell her what the book said. And then she would remember it. Auditory learning. She'd be able to recite and retell what was told to her. and she managed to be a very successful adult and go to college and all the rest of it. But she was better at math because you didn't need to do so much reading, and subjects that required a lot of reading she struggled with. So I just feel that, as you say, an individualized approach and good assessment and good strategies to help folks is sort of critical to this process. I don't have any other questions. I really applaud this effort. It's critically important, and I hope to be of any support that I can be going forward. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Braden. And this is, I guess, to either Christine or Candace. Do we have any public testimony? Has anyone signed up to testify?
Councilor, there was a Michael Cuna that signed up, but I do not see him in the list of attendees, so he must not have made it. Other than that, I haven't received any requests for public testimony.
Very good. And then to Councilor Mejia, you are aware of anyone else that was wishing to offer public testimony that you know of? That?
No, not that I know of, but I do know that Christine had her hand up, and I also have my hand up. So before we wrap up, just want to make sure that Christine, it's an opportunity.
Very good. So Kristen DeVolio, can you see me, Kristen? You're on mute, Kristen.
Sorry, yes. I just, as Edith was talking, I was thinking we do have a teacher here who is Wilson trained, which is a very similar reading program to the Orton Gillingham. And it is, we're teaching students how to read and spell and write through the program. And it's been one of our, most popular classes here. And so having that specialized teacher on board with us, we're truly lucky to have that support to be able to provide it to our students. And I just want to thank everyone for inviting me here. I do have a prior engagement, so I'm going to head out. But
thank you, Kristen. You are excused, and Julie has her hand raised. So Julie, whatever questions you have, and then we can close it out.
Yeah, so just two things I wanted to, with Elizabeth Santiago, I know that you've been doing some programming and thinking about some creative ways to engage young people in reading and learning and literacy. So would love to hear a little bit about that. And then I also just want to underscore that my hope is that this ordinance, this task force will help us unpack what the issues are, but that to bring the thought leaders into the space so that we can address it, both in our Boston Public Schools and our workforce development and our adult learners and new immigrants, right? And I want to just be really clear that this is not just for immigrants and, ELLs. Like, this issue is impacting students from all across the spectrum here. So I just want to make sure that as we start thinking about this, that we're not just focusing on ELLs, right? Like, this situation is impacting students from across the entire city. But Elizabeth, would love to learn a little bit more about some of the work that you've been doing and kind of like what you've been hearing from this space and creating some space for us to really think creatively about like how we can tackle this.
Thank you, Councilor Mejia. I'm very much a processor, so I have been listening in and taking in everything everyone has been saying, and it's very much in line with all of the experiences that I've had as an educator and as a curriculum designer, in particular for adults who are learning or struggling to read. And so I went into my doctoral program with this focus on motivation versus like the tactical sort of reading skills that Edith so described. The interest that I had was on how to keep motivation alive, because one of the questions that was posed, I think you posed a question about how long does it take? And I often had students come to me and say, I just need a job, or I need to get this done. And then when I did some initial assessments, they were reading at a third grade level. And I knew that it would take a lot of time. And I didn't want them to lose motivation, and I didn't want them to feel disappointed. So I would do a lot of things to try to keep that motivation alive. And one of the things that I found success in is using creative writing techniques. So similarly to like having students choose their goals at the beginning or at the outset, I would talk to them about like, everyone sort of has written a poem or, has something that they want to express, whether it's through some journal writing or things like that, regardless of levels, even if they could speak what what they would like to voice in some way. Then we could talk about, how to translate that into some writing. And I had a lot of success with that. And my doctoral work focused on working with adult students. They happened to all be women who were, the age range was, there was an 80-year-old student that I worked with, a 45-year-old and a 20-year-old. So I had a bit of the spectrum. And they each were able to participate because they wanted to tell their life story. So we did a lot of memoir work, and actually was able to build a curriculum where I looked at how the writing skills they needed translated to literacy skills, or those academic skills that are needed to pass a test like a GED or a HiSET. Again, I was able to really just sort of extrapolate a lot of those skills. And so when I built the site, the Untold Narratives, I built a lot of that into the site. There are small chunks of things that folks can learn to just sort of express themselves. I'm not looking for perfection. This is a space where regardless of if you make spelling errors or if you are still learning how to write a sentence, you can come and explore. And I think that it's important. I think my takeaway from this conversation is that we can't do the same old. We sort of have to look at this in a way that is reflective of innovative practices and taking into consideration the whole student, not just these practical skills, which are wonderful and you need them, but also about, their motivation, their emotional side, their sense of identity and their sense of pride in who they are as people. And so I think that is crucial if you want this to be a success, and focus on a different way to look at this work, or a deeper way to look at it, I guess.
Thank you for that. And that's why I invited both Edith and you to be part of the panel from a community and people who have lived the experiences and have been doing the work in your own prospective spaces, because I really do think that one of the mandates of this task force is to really challenge ourselves to really think outside the box and to be bolder, and to also hold ourselves accountable to how do we measure success, right? What would this look like? And maybe even we could design something that we can pilot, and look at young people, look at adult learners, and do things differently. And I think when we to Councilor Flaherty's question in terms of who should be on the task force, I would love to have some folks who are struggling right now, who are living these realities, to help inform the work. I think that's going to be crucial in terms of our success. And I also love and appreciate the asset base, because I think sometimes we always lead with the things that we don't have, but there's a lot of resiliency and a lot of survivor skills to be able to come up in a system knowing that you have struggled to read and write your entire life, but you have still managed to get by. And I think those cases exist, and would love to. My doggy is letting everybody know. But yeah, would love to figure out how we can continue to have this conversation, and incredibly grateful for everyone's time and energy, and looking forward to the next steps. Thank you, Councilor Flaherty.
Thank you very much, Councilor Mejia. Is that the Chihuahua you're always talking about?
Well, yeah. No, I'm the Chihuahua in the house, and Toby is the Shih Tzu. But yes, I'm always barking at somebody, guys. You know that.
Well, that will conclude today's hearing, unless anyone else has any additional thoughts and comments. So the Committee on Government Operations, with respect to docket 0600, that's an ordinance to create a task force to address literacy rates in the city of Boston. The chair on Committee on Government Operations will adjourn the hearing. Thank you all for your participation and involvement, and look forward to working with you moving forward. Thanks, Councilor Mejia, to my colleagues and to all panelists. Have a great day.
Thank you, guys.
The committee hearing is adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.